Welcome back to the Photo Banter podcast. I'm your host, Alex Gagne, and on today's podcast, I speak with professional photo retoucher Angie Hayes. Angie Hayes has been working as a professional photographic retoucher for over 20 years, having worked with clients such as Disney Studios, Netflix, GQ, and MTV, to name a few. Angie has collaborated with some of the top working commercial and editorial photographers working today, including Art Streiber, Dominic Disaia, Peggy Sirota, and Miller Mobley, to name a few. In this interview, I speak to Angie about what drew her to photographic retouching, using Photoshop since the first edition, and I also speak to Angie about what advice she'd give to someone looking to pursue a career in photo retouching. Angie is someone who truly loves what she does and brings a wealth of knowledge and experience, so I was really excited to get a chance to speak with her. So I hope you enjoy, and thanks so much for listening. All right. Well, Angie Hayes, welcome to the podcast. Really excited to talk to you. How's it going? It's been a crazy last 6 months for everybody in the world. I guess for you, how's life? How's work? How are things?
Things are good. I feel like for the most part, we're in sort of a different situation. I mean, I know that the world is in a terrible place and it should be all, devastation and sadness. And when I focus on what's happening in the world, it is absolutely devastating. And it was, it was one of those things where I think everyone thought it would blow over pretty quickly and that it would, everyone would shelter in place, and in a couple of weeks we'd be, kind of back to normal. And when that didn't happen, I think, at first it was shocking and scary, but for me, where I'm such a workaholic and I just go. And, sometimes, most people, they'll work 80 hours in 2 weeks, where that's like my 1 week.
Yep.
So for me, I feel like in our little bubble, our household here with my husband and my son, we just kind of just enjoyed that time together and being able to stop and sort of have this forced moment where you're like, okay, what's really important? I can't work right now. That's scary. If I focus on that, that's a little terrifying, and being worried about all my clients and just the industry and then all these people. And, of course, obviously the people who are dealing with actual COVID and family members and people with small children and people who can't work. So when I focus on that, it's a hard thing to think about, but then we kind of just launched ourselves into family time, and
that's good.
We're big nerds here too. So I have a teenage son, he's 14. And so my husband and I, we actually have 3 PlayStations and 3 TVs. And we play PlayStation together.
I was gonna ask you that because one of my friends he's a professional retoucher too, and I don't know if this happens a lot, but I feel like people that are like really into retouching, they probably like video games too. Because like he told me,
I don't know why. Yeah,
he told me he's like I view retouching as like a video game in a sense, and I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense.
Huh? Yeah, I never connected the two, but yeah, it's just like a thing that we've always done together as like family time. And it's so funny because we're very, very calm, gentle people. I feel like the kind of people that don't get angry. Yeah. And so it's funny that we're like in this, player versus player, like killing people, like
what games have you guys been playing?
We play a lot, but our family game is Destiny. And so, there's like where you are playing against like aliens and monsters or whatever, robots, but then there's where you're playing against people online. And so we do a lot of that, and it's just so completely the opposite of like who we are, and it's so
that's
really
awesome,
funny.
man. I feel like I gotta dust. I never really was big into video games growing up. I feel like I gotta dust off my like Sega or something and get my parents to play video games next Thanksgiving or something. It seems like a fun family activity.
Well, what's the funniest thing too is that these games, it's all young people, and so when you do really well, it's very competitive, it's very challenging. I get into that part of it, and when we're doing well, it's funny to think about. Here's this like this couple in their 40s, like going against these like 17-year-olds that are that's their life is gaming. So it is kind of an extra. We feel pretty cool about ourselves, when we do well, and it's a challenge.
No doubt. And with like, I guess like with the pandemic and everything, was the first few months, was business kind of slow for you, or has it been kind of steady with projects all along, or how's work life been for you, I guess?
At first I still had some things, that already had been shot. And so I was fortunate in the beginning. I didn't have that panic that a lot of people did, but then it was pretty crazy to see all these jobs that had been on hold fall away, because everybody was planning, nobody knew this was going to happen. So there was a lot on hold, and there were a lot of shoots that were, scheduled, and it was really, exciting jobs. And then to watch that fall away, it was very scary, and, kind of wondering what was going to happen. But for the most part, I've had enough to kind of, to not be too stressed about things. There was a definite lull, I think, in the middle where things kind of were,
do you feel like, I feel like this sometimes, like for me, like if I don't shoot photos for a while, like especially during the beginning of the pandemic, cause like I mostly shoot portraiture. So it was like this weird scenario where you're not supposed to interact with people, social distance. So I wasn't, for a few months, I really didn't shoot anything. And do you feel like you get rusty, like if you're not retouching all the time? Because I feel like that as a photographer, like if I go, like going 3 months, my first shoot back, I was like, oh, this feels like, took me a little while to get my feet settled,
Yeah, it seems different. Yeah. I mean, I really felt for, like photographers like you, where it is all about that person to person. And I'm so used to being in my dark bat cave by myself, so, I mean, I'm always retouching. I'm always working. The other thing too, during the pandemic, it was an opportunity for me to kind of get into my personal projects and have some time to do things. And, but I do feel like if you do stop, there is something about that, not so much getting rusty, but it's like you're in a zone, in a groove.
Yeah.
And so there were periods of time where, it felt a little bit weird, but then I have so many interests in so many things. I love painting, drawing, photography. I do. So it's like they all kind of influence each other and help each other out. Anything that I do photographically helps my retouching and vice versa. So, I don't know. Again, like I was saying, I'm a workaholic. I never stop. That's, I think me and my husband, that's how we work. Like, it's our dynamic. He's very zen and calm, and I'm just go, go, go. So, so I feel like I don't know if I even took a good enough break during this. Like, I think I had a couple weeks but
that's awesome. It's just like, I feel like that with the camera, it's just so much a part of my life. Like, it's just always there. And it's like a retouching. It's just like, it's just part of your everyday life, pretty much. It seems like it's just like you want to get on there, work on stuff, and just keep on building.
It's an amazing field. It's amazing, just in general, that we're doing this. That we're talking about this. That we're in a creative field.
Yeah,
it's an amazing thing.
Yeah, it is exciting. And with your work, actually, I was curious. Like, obviously, it looks like you work like with a ton of photographers. Do you ever work with like other artists, like on their projects, or is it mostly kind of strictly photography stuff you're working on?
Well, it's a bit of a range. I mean, mostly it's photographers, but, I do a lot of stuff for agencies and businesses too, like NBC, like networks and for shows. But it's not, it's mainly photography. I haven't done collaborations that are other like media, but then I do, other creative pursuits that are similar, like for my own stuff. But as far as the business, it's all mainly photographers and their clients.
Yeah, because it's interesting because like Photoshop is like such an interesting tool because like even like illustrators utilize it and all types of different artists. So it's kind of interesting like to see what other people can do with that tool,
It's a beautiful program. I mean, they keep making it weirder as I feel like I liked it maybe, I don't know, 6 incarnations ago, but it is, you can do so much. I mean, I do a lot of drawing, and illustration with Photoshop too, where most people would use Illustrator, but Photoshop's like my best friend, I know it so well.
What is it about, like, when you say it's gotten weirder, you feel like they've kind of made it like not as like intuitive to use the program, or like, what do you mean by like weirder, you think?
Well, they keep just like everything now in today's world, like the updates, constantly. It's like, you turn your head and it's like, oh, there's another update. And so, I started in the 90s, so I'm showing my age a little, but, I started back when, I remember when there wasn't layers. So So I just think like over the years, more like in the recent years, I feel like since maybe since it went online, I feel like they're trying to market towards more people, which makes sense for them as a business. And they're putting more and more things in there to help people do things easier or quicker. And it's just getting clunkier, and it's not as fast as it once was. And I feel like there's all this extra stuff that, like, for me and you know, people who've used it for so long and used it professionally, like, you know, these animated tools come up and show you what the brush looks like, and you're like, what the heck is it you're trying to do? So get out of here, you know? And like, so I feel like my Photoshop, if somebody who was using it, let's say they're new to Photoshop right now and they're using it as how it is, like when you just buy it, if they were to look at my Photoshop and the way it looks, because I've customized the crap out of it, and I have all my own keys, and I switch everything to be more legacy mode and things that, because again, the stuff that they just keep adding these things that are not necessarily helpful to the way that I work, you know, like how, like sticky tabs. I remember when that was first a thing. I remember like restarting Photoshop with that update, and where like all the things would stick together instead of like the floating windows. And like how when they first did that, you didn't realize in that instant that you could change it back. I was like, what is this? You know, like, they're all sticking together.
How do I get back? Bring me back home. Bring me back home.
And the application frame was like, oh no, like, so it's so funny to remember those moments, because I like to, if I'm doing a series of images, I'm obsessive with matching and cohesive looks and continuity, and it's all about the way an image, like a story of images, work together. So I like to have them all up on my screen, and especially when they're small, you can even see things so much better, like how you can kind of bring everything together as a color family or create a treatment. And so, sticky tab is, what is this?
That is a good point. Like that is like a real skill. Like when you're editing like large amounts of photos, you need them all to look alike. Like I worked at Hasbro for a while, like in their in-house studio, and we do like light retouching, but it was all e-commerce stuff. And it was like so important that because we'd shoot like hundreds, thousands images, and you had to make sure that they all looked exactly the same. So they went on the website, and it was just like, there is tedious. It's very tedious, because like anybody can make like one photo look good, but then it's like, all right, you need to match that to like every other one. It's like, it's a lot of like tedious and having the eye for it.
Absolutely. Well, and especially when it's something like for a movie, like publicity, and it's a famous person, you know, most of the stuff I do is celebrity. And I remember the first really big one where I was an actor, and I remember thinking, man, like I know Matt Damon's face better than his own mother. And like, and you get to a point where you can't remove a certain thing on one and not on the other. And you've got, you know, with 5 images, it's not a big deal, but you've got 30. It's like, I have to be, you know, so systematic. So, you know, such a perfectionist as far as like what I'm changing on each for that perfect, you know.
So that's interesting. Like, so like you said, like if you're photographing Matt Damon or something, will you like go back and look at other photos that like other people worked on as like a reference sometimes? Because I know like a lot of times photographers, if they're going to go shoot, I don't know, Tom Hanks or something, they'll go look back at like what other photographers have done and things like that. Do you kind of look at reference material yourself at all?
Sometimes I do. It depends on sort of the creative direction of that particular project, and how much my own influence can come into play, because for the most part, I'm pleasing a client and what they want. And then sometimes there's a very different avenue where they're like, do your thing, you know? And so sometimes if it's more of where I'm kind of doing my own thing and they're allowing me to kind of judge how far I want to take it, I'll look at what's out in the world. I'll look and see what made people happy in the past. Because, you know, when it comes to photography or retouching, we really want the subject to feel great about it. We want everyone to love what they're looking at. So it's important to kind of see what else is out there. But it's funny though, looking at references, because I'm sort of a strange retoucher. I'm the retoucher that hates retouching. Like I hate the way it looks, like you know, in the world at large. I feel like everything is overdone, and I'm so picky with myself, with everything. And so sometimes I look at things and sometimes I don't. You know, I feel like as I get older, as the more experience I have, I kind of try to keep things more minimal, you know, and really try to like create a look and make something special and enhance it, but make sure that the photography is the star and people aren't looking at that and go, oh, that's retouched. And I think nowadays it's really easy to kind of, I do that myself, or sometimes I can't even look at something because it's so retouched. I'm like, that's, what did they do? You know? So I try to be kind of in a, you know, on that very like
it's
true
been
to the
kind of
photography.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see too. Like, I think maybe more in the fashion world and stuff. I've seen some magazines in the last few years where they'll just kind of do very light retouching because the thing they were getting the blowback of like, oh, you're making these women or whoever's on the magazine look, they don't look like real people because it's like so much retouching. So it's been kind of interesting to see like they'll do like, I think I've seen some covers with like no makeup and it's just like basic color correction and things like that. And they kind of just let the people kind of be themselves instead of this like over like liquefied tool and all this, and by the end of it they kind of look like porcelain or something, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that feel, you know, strongly about keeping things a little more on the, you know, having things more real and not distracting, because it can be more distracting, you know, like someone that's overdone or airbrushed or something, that's more distracting than if they have wrinkles. And the wrinkles are awesome. I think they look great. I think it's strange when you see there's certain types of retouching where they'll take away that, you know, under eye bag.
Yep.
And it's like, it looks so bizarre. Like people look like completely different. They don't look like themselves, you know? But what's funny to think about is you're talking about that sort of blowback, you know, where people were getting upset about things being changed too much. What is also really funny is there's that aspect of it. And then now with all the Botox and things and working on celebrities, sometimes I've added a little bit of wrinkles with shading and things like because people do so much to themselves.
Yep.
But I'm like, I don't want people to think I did that, you know, like I don't want people like, what did she do to that dude? You know, like, so it's funny because that never used to be a thing. You know, when I started, it was days of film, and that was less of a, you know, it wasn't so much Botoxing as there is now. And so, and then sometimes I even get a request from clients, like, can you make him look less ridiculous? Like he did a few procedures and it's like, well, I can do some things, but I mean, you know, I can't change too much.
Yeah. It's like you make Mickey Rourke look like old Mickey Rourke or something.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be a fun project.
Good luck. I guess to go back, like, where do you grow up and like, how do you kind of get into this like creative space? Like, were you always kind of interested in the arts, or what was kind of life like for you growing up?
I grew up in Michigan. I feel like I'm pretty much the same person I was when I was like 5. You know, I always wanted to be doing something in the arts, and I always wanted to create. And I don't remember wanting to do anything else at any point. And so, but I was more into the fine art part of it, drawing, painting, you know, creating something with my hands.
Yeah.
And so, you know, in high school, I feel like throughout my career, it's funny if I look back, when you're going through something, you don't really realize how major certain things are. It's only when you're like in your 40s and you're looking back. And when I look back at my history of sort of where I began and where I am now, there were these huge points of change and just pushing me out of my comfort zone, just drastic change where I made sort of this giant step to the next level. And so I feel like that's kind of the easiest way to explain my path to now, is kind of like those huge, you know, risk-taking moments where, or just moments of intense change that kind of got me to where I am now. And so it was kind of like going into high school and having the art classes and stuff like that. That's where it all kind of, you know, taking your first photo class and getting really interested in that. And then I was, you know, we didn't have the most money at that time. And so I knew that I wanted to go to college, but I wasn't sure where I was going to end up. And thinking of colleges like RISD and like places where it's just like so expensive. And, you know, it's like,
I don't understand how people RISD, like,
oh my gosh. Well, just in general. Yeah. Like art schools and the equipment that you have to buy. So in high school, I was in this place where like I knew I wanted to pursue the arts in some way. And it was really my high school teacher. She got my college application for me and basically put it in my hands. And it's like, you're applying to this place, whether you can afford it or not, just do it.
Yeah.
So I ended up going in with a fine art portfolio and a photography portfolio. And I got scholarships for both. And so I double majored. And that was, now it's called College for Creative Studies, but at that time it was Center for Creative Studies. It's in Detroit, right by the Detroit Institute of Arts. They're more known for, because Detroit, they're more known for like transportation design and design, but it was super expensive school, but I made it in. And that's kind of where I feel like, and at that time I knew Photoshop and I was teaching myself things, but that particular college at that time, this was, 98 was when I graduated high school. So there were no digital classes. There was no retouching. I don't think I knew the word retouching, but I was, in Photoshop and kind of learning the tools and things like that. But
when you first started using Photoshop, like what were you kind of utilizing it for? Was it for your photography, or were you kind of using it for other things? Or
well, it was just, the nerd in me wanting to understand this program and like what it all could do. So I was really trying to learn it. And then, in high school, I worked part-time. I helped out one of my teachers doing graphic design. So I was learning that and actually getting, work even in high school. I was doing things. And then, at the college level, everything was analog. Everything was darkroom. We did 4x5 film, and I shot mostly 645 Mamiya. And so I really got into the craft of the darkroom. But at the same time, I was still learning Photoshop and just being so excited about it and like trying to figure out what I could do in the program, even though the only class they had was like a kind of basic skills, like try to build a little tiny, terrible website, because again, it's funny to think about that. Actually, that school at that time, early 2000, the only digital camera they had was this giant monstrosity that would take, I forget how many minutes it would take, but you could only shoot stills like that. It was it was a humongous.
Was it like the Kodak one?
I wish I could remember. Yeah, I could remember like the model name or something. Yeah,
I remember. I went to the George Eastman House, the museum, and they had like a whole exhibit of like the first digital cameras, awesome. And like you said, it was like this monstrosity.
It was like the size of a person. Yeah, and like you had to wait like 15 minutes to see what it would do, and it couldn't do people because it took so long to capture the image. So yeah, again, college was all about darkroom and that type of thing. And it's funny to think now with, comparing it to retouching and what I do, I was obsessive about tonal range in the darkroom, getting my 0 filter and my 5 filter and getting like every possible, little, I guess shade of gray in within black and white photography.
So you kind of always enjoyed like more like the process of like manipulating the photo after the fact than actually taking the picture. It sounds like
just the control, the whole thing. Like I love shooting. I love light. I think anyone that starts out in photography and even just drawing, figure drawing. I used to be able to draw like from life, like photorealistic images. And it's all about the light. That's how you learn to draw with like charcoal and pencil, is you have to understand light and shadow and how it gradates and how, you represent a 3D object in a 2D space. So I think the drawing part and then the photography, I guess to like fast forward that story a little bit, so it's not so long. I ended up focusing just on photography. And so I dropped so I went to just a single major of photography. And then I kind of was still teaching myself Photoshop at the time, but it was all about creating my own images and kind of, I actually wanted to be a photographer at that.
What kind of stuff were you shooting? What kind of photography did you enjoy back then?
It was all studio. It was always like creating something from nothing.
So like still life?
People. So it kind of everything, but mostly it was about, composition and form. I was very obsessed with line and light and kind of creating these edge lights and sort of a more abstract forms, like more like sensual kinds of things, like a lot of just portraiture and more like cropped in types of things. But it was really just always about the composition and about sort of reaching for that. You'll get an idea in your head, and for me, the studio, it was very much like painting and drawing. But then at the same time, street shooters and photos and photographers like that, I was obsessed with their work and I admired it so much because it wasn't my thing. Like I couldn't just go be invisible on the street and get these amazing shots, and that the school too, we had a lot of great people come in and talk to us. And it was just, if I could just live at photo school, it was just amazing to be surrounded.
I agree. Like I remember, when I went to RIT and like looking back on it now, like the first week I was in school, they had like Mary Ellen Mark came and spoke at the school. They had like Dan Winters. And at that point, I didn't know who any of these people were. Like I wasn't looking at photography like that. So it was just such an eye-opening thing.
That's a gift right there.
Yeah, school is an amazing thing. Do you feel like it's interesting to say like you were into drawing and stuff. Do you feel like having those skills has kind of helped your retouching? Because like almost like now you don't draw on paper. You have I'm guessing you use a Wacom tablet or something,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very much like drawing and making selections is there like some similarities there, you think?
Oh, it's huge. I feel like it's a big part of, the retoucher that I am today, I think, because what's funny how you're talking about getting rusty, like about with the pandemic. So when it comes to drawing is a skill. I mean, I could take any photo and, draw it. Like I could take a pair of pants and draw it and it look like a photorealistic, pair of jeans or something. And so, but then if you don't do that, if you don't draw constantly with your hands, like you do lose that. But then the less I was drawing with my hands, the more I was drawing with the Wacom. And now if I want to draw something, I actually draw better on the Wacom whereas I used to be like so good with, my, like a pencil. Yeah. So I think that drawing, I mean, and also too, the influences that I had when I was into more like a fine art, or pursuing that, like MC Escher, I was obsessed, and Salvador Dali, there's a lot of painters, like, yeah. So just in terms of like that starting place of just inspiration, I feel like drawing and just being so immersed in like creating light and trying to reproduce that on paper, when it comes to retouching, lighting is so important when you're trying to, especially some of the stuff that I do where, you might have half of a cast shot in LA and half of the cast shot in New York. And you got to put them together, and there's a person leaning on someone else, and they have to create that shadow. And so I think any type of drawing, any type of photography, anything that deals with lighting and form and shape and realism, I would say also proportion, when you're putting new heads on people, all of that stuff is so completely like, it's just such a great background when you're doing retouching. It all like influences the other.
Yeah, and it's good you have that like experience yourself of shooting, because I would imagine like being that you work for all different types of photographers, you have to be able to like understand the language they're speaking, like, or I use this type of light or that type of light, and it's just like you understand it. There's like a shorthand of like professional photographers and stuff, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I think it's super valuable. I mean, and also too, to be able to communicate if somebody has an idea, a crazy idea, and they're like, how do we do this? I can help them, I can talk about how to shoot it and the best way to shoot it, to cut it out, or to do whatever we need to do to like create that vision they have. I can kind of come up with a game plan, because I would think of how I would shoot it. And then also the fact that I still do shoot and I have a studio, it's like, sometimes I have to shoot for a composite. Like sometimes I'll have to shoot like an element if I don't have it. Whereas years ago, I didn't have that capability because I didn't have the space, I didn't have the equipment. It's sometimes if you don't have an element, you're doing a composite and they're like, oh, we need this. And there's a shoe missing, it's like, well, we got to find a shoe. And, I've done some crazy things, where I would just have to find something. Whereas now, I've been able to do, it's kind of fun that now I can go in and actually match the light and try to shoot an element that I can put into a composite if something somehow wasn't made, or if there's, I could give an example of that maybe too.
That's what I was talking to Art last week, and he's like, ask Angie about some of the crazy stuff she's like from scratch and like put together.
Oh, Art is awesome. Yeah, we had a conversation about it, and it was so funny because it's like, it's not retouching. A lot of the stuff that I do with those types of things, I don't even know what you call it. And like, it's like inventing things that weren't there. Or, yeah, it's not exactly retouching, but so one of the examples I could give, I feel like I'm terrible at Instagram. I'm just going to say that I'm horrible at social media. I feel like I'm trying to be better recently, but it feels very unnatural to me.
I think people would love it though, because you have like this skill set, and like people want to hear the behind, like look at Art's Instagram.
You were talking about it's legendary.
But you could do like the same thing, just because like you have so much knowledge in what you do. Like people eat that stuff up,
I just see, that's what I mean. Like, I know it's fun so what I meant was like, I'm not very good at it, but like, I'm trying to be better at it. But, so one of the things I did put on there was, that image I did for this campaign for Kremer Johnson, where there's an IT guy with his big Fabio hair. And he had a wig on. And, so a good example of sort of the unusual things that I've done that is not quite retouching is, he's wearing a wig, so he didn't have a scalp, right? So like his hair's supposed to be blowing up. So where you would see the hair lift up, you would have like the scalp in your hair, you know, and you would have where you'd see the forehead, and the wig was down over his forehead.
Was it this one?
Yeah, exactly. So where the wig was, you know, almost to his eyebrows originally, he needed a scalp. He needed that part in the middle of his hair right there.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to use a combination of shooting myself and then finding a plate. And you actually used an actress who will remain, or she'll remain nameless, but I used a piece of her scalp and then a piece of what I shot. And I was able to create that, so that part in the middle of his hair where you can see the skin like that. Yeah. So that is like, so normally you can't just like, you know, invent a scalp. It's not exactly retouching, like, hey, I need a scalp here. But so that's definitely a good example, I feel like, of just a very unusual thing that I can't imagine ever have even thinking about, you know, 20 years ago, like, oh, that's retouching. It's like, it's more just like these custom creations for whatever the concept needs.
It's kind of like sculpting, like in a digital sense, like you're molding these things into whatever world you want, whatever you're molding, some mountains or someone's scalp. When you're looking for, like, when you need these like components to add to photos, like obviously you said sometimes you'll shoot it yourself. Like, do you ever like pull like stock photography, or how do you kind of find the elements you need usually?
Oh yeah. A really good example of that would be that job we did for EW with Key and Peele, which is another good one on the Instagram, where we had to just where Key drew on Peele's photo and Peele drew on Key's photo, and then I had to make their weird requests come to life. And a lot of that was just finding things. Yeah, like stock stuff. Some of the magazine gave me some things, and then there's other things where, well, like his he had drawn on Peele, he wanted a black eye, and that black eye, I hand painted that, and I just looked at references and I created it.
Here's one.
Yeah, but other things like that, it's water spray, or he needed to have a blowhole. So that I just found online. I feel like I have, if I could be in college right now, I would say I have a minor in Googling. Like, I feel like I've done so much, like, trying to find high res images.
Yeah.
And like somehow you'll find like this strange site in Japan that happens to have this, like, you know, 5,000 pixel image online somehow, and I'll grab that, you know. And
can you still search? I don't know if they used to have it. I don't know if I can find it.
They keep changing it.
Yeah, on Google image search, you used to be able to search by like size. It used to be easier to find, but now I don't know where the setting is, because sometimes for myself. Yeah.
You can do the size, but they changed it. It used to be so much easier. You could grab anything, but now there's all these like usage rights and where it doesn't, most sites, you can't actually get like the proper size, but I found like weird ways of, you know, you, like I was saying, that Japan site, sometimes you can just find these, and I've been really lucky in that way, just hunting. But I would love to know, I would love to quantify the amount of hours I've spent looking for weird crap to like put in a photo. But I have amassed a huge library of stuff that I've shot, stuff that I've, you know, stock that I bought over the years. And I have a giant library of things that I can use.
Yeah,
like
so if
textures.
you need palm trees or whatever, you
like
got a whole library of it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like when you got out of college, like you said, like you said you wanted to be a photographer. Like what was kind of your first step kind of into the creative world? Like, what did you think you were going to do, I guess?
Well, that goes back to my scary risk milestones that have happened in my life. And that, so I did want to be a photographer. I had big dreams, thinking that it was going to be a lot easier. We all know it's not easy. We all know it's next to impossible. So yeah, I was very naive. But also my school, it's kind of funny that the school I went to, they tell you at orientation day, they basically say, if you want to make money, get out of here. And like, if you think you're going to get a job, get over it, you know, and they really aggressively prepare you.
Yeah.
So the way what happened for me though, it was a very unusual situation. My senior year of college, we found out towards the end, there was this job opportunity for the school where there was a company hiring from Arizona. They came to the school, and it was sort of, they kind of promoted it like this contest, like, okay, there are a few spots, and people who are in school right now, and then the alumni also any alumni it's open to them too. So there were 4 spots. There were 2 alumni spots and then 2 current students. And there's only 1 photography spot, and it was a job for a staff photographer, and I won it. So
what was the company like? What kind of stuff were they doing?
Well, I'm probably gonna say some not nice things about them, so they can rename or they can be named. Right. So it was, well, let's just say there's a reason they were hiring all the way across the United States.
Yep.
Which I didn't think about that at the time. So I was just thinking, oh my gosh, I got a staff photography job. This is a company that they had a magazine, they did a lot of merchandising, a lot of, they had apparel, toys. So it was insane, and I was a very shy kid. I was very much introverted to myself, like just let me draw in my little corner. I was not the kind of person that just picks up all of the stuff they have and moves to all the way across the country where they don't know a single person.
Yeah.
But when you're dealing with a situation like, wanting to be a photographer and you get offered this one spot and all these people, so in a way, I think I forgot to be terrified.
It's exciting.
Yeah, I think I was terrified, but I also kind of forgot about it because it's like, I won the thing, so yeah, I drove my Burgundy Beast out there in my Lumina. It fell apart on the way because of the heat going from Michigan to Arizona, pieces falling off, but I made it. And to sum up that experience, oh my gosh. So yeah, very cool to say that you're a staff photographer at a company, but the reason they hired people from a totally different state all the way across the U.S. is because they had a horrible reputation. People would not stay working for them because they ran it terribly. No one wanted to work for them. It was
chaos,
true chaos. It was absolutely insane. And I feel like I could have like a series of podcasts basically all about that experience called My First Job from Hell, so I won't go too far into it.
I get it. Yeah.
But basically, I mean, when you are put in a situation like that, you do learn a lot because it's just madness. And, so many people would be leaving and they had a lot of things they were trying to accomplish as a company. And the leadership was so god awful. There were times, just one small example where, a normal job as a photographer, you would be shooting, let's say, food for a holiday magazine. So shooting some treats and that goes into the magazine. Well, that turned into me finding recipes, making all the food, shooting all the food, making a background, doing posts on all the food, writing the entire column about the food, and then also writing horoscopes because they had this magazine, right? I had to make up horoscopes for I'll look great today. You'll find friendship in unexpected places. I had to that's how this place, it was just madness. You're doing the job of 10 people.
Yeah, there's taking advantage of people. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can laugh about it now, but it was a truly crazy, it was like the Twilight Zone. It was very, and for me, I mean, I was very young and naive and I was just kind of whoa, talk about a shock to the system that this is how places can run. So I feel like it was a really good, eye-opening experience for me that people cannot tell you the truth. And sometimes you'll get a job and it's not at all what they said it was going to be. And it was very much grow up and this is what's, you got to figure this out. And so, but the hardest part, honestly, was the local people that had worked there for years and they had families. I was 21, but they had families, and it's to see this company and the way that everyone was treated, it was a horrible, toxic environment. And so, but I did learn what I could learn and I moved on. And that was definitely a time too, where I was, again, more leaning on Photoshop and learning. And because I was just this is crazy. I don't know if I can do photography. I don't know if this is what, if this makes sense for me. And so, when I left there, I was still kind of doing both, where I was doing little side things, retouching and doing, shooting actors headshots and shooting little local bands, shooting their CD covers. And it's so funny to say CD covers, but that kind of thing, shooting for little magazine stuff. And so I was sort of doing both at that point once I decided that I had to get away from that place. But that's sort of the giant risk that moved me in that, all the way across the country to this place. And I feel like it all happens for a reason. When you look back, it's it doesn't matter what you go through. It always makes sense.
It's peaks and valleys. You learn what you don't want to do, and then you just try to hopefully kind of keep on progressing, you know?
Yeah. Well, when you look back, it's always the craziest things that you do. And it's like, wow, well, that got me there and that got me there. And it always makes so much sense. It's always like, that was absolutely meant to be. But in the moment, you're like, what is happening?
I can't wait to get out of here. I'm like trying to find who's hiring.
Yeah. And I wrote this letter to the entire company when I left. And after I left, I found out from other people that they got rid of inter-office email because of me. But I basically wrote down just all the lies that they said, and kind of just a love letter to all the employees there. I hope you get out of here, be true to yourself. It was very dramatic. It was like a high school movie or something.
That's hilarious.
I'm going, guys, and so
yeah, no doubt.
It was surreal.
When did you kind of start thinking you wanted to focus on retouching full time? And did you kind of always envision kind of working for yourself, or did you kind of ever work for any other retouching houses or anything like that? Or
well, I didn't really at that point. I was still trying to make it as a photographer, and I wasn't really thinking about retouching as a job at that point, a full-time job, because I was still learning things and I still had that dream of, I want to shoot people and I want to be famous. And so but I was starting to I ended up working for these wedding photographers and kind of taking odd jobs and things like that. And then at that time in Arizona was when I met my husband. So it was 18 years ago. And I was doing set photography, so doing stills for movies, and he was working on a movie doing key set PA, and so I was the still photographer, and so I wasn't thinking about what I wanted to do exactly. I was just kind of trying to figure it out. But then here we are in this movie. We meet this, there's a producer, who's just the nicest guy. And he's like, you guys need to move to California. What are you doing? You want to be in photography. You want to be in film. What are you doing? And he let us sleep in his bed, stay in his Hollywood Hills house. Wow. And we stayed in California for 3 days trying to and it was just such a whirlwind, just crazy. We were just kind of going with it. We were young and we didn't know exactly what we wanted to do, but we knew that we needed to, listen to people. And, it's okay, that sounded great. Let's move to California. So in 3 days, we found a place out here. Damn. And people say that they packed up and moved. We literally, there were some things in boxes, but we were chucking stuff into a U-Haul. We were just grabbing stuff. It was ridiculous. We found someone to take over our lease. We moved out here. We didn't have jobs, which that is, again, I was talking about giant risk things. I am not the kind of person to do that. I'm not a person that does, change well. I want everything to be perfect. I want to have the safety net. And we, weren't making any money. We drive out here. We moved to Los Feliz. And then as soon as we got out here, I was just kind of going to labs and things, different labs. And I ended up getting a job at a new lab that, at a time when labs were kind of dying too. I got a job at a photo lab in Hollywood.
Oh, and was it A&I?
It was the people that left A&I and they started Pro One.
In
Hollywood. Yeah. So I got a job at Pro One, and that was 2005. And so they didn't really do a lot of retouching. It was more they were still doing C prints and they were doing black and white prints, and they were doing large format printing on the Epson. So most of the retouching they did was where someone would come in and want to match their screen and get the Epson color in a good place. So over the few years I was there, I built their retouching department up just by doing more and more stuff and getting, and that was again, more of where we would retouch film. So film that was scanned, it was still kind of at the beginning and, doing film and digital. And that's when I realized, that's when I got my first job as a retoucher. And I was, just working my butt off, trying to get more people in there. And it was, again, just a weird blend of luck and serendipity. It's someone was just you need to move to LA, and we did. And then I'm just asking around and they hired me right on the spot. And it's, I feel very blessed, all these weird, crazy things that have happened. It's almost somebody was kind of just taking care of me and it was all working out. The universe is here you go, do some hard work and,
if you work hard and you have a skill set, I think people will recognize it. And it's you got to take chances or else nothing's going to happen really. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would never have called myself a risk taker. It's so funny to think about that, but we did do some crazy things, and it always. is like moving out here was absolutely completely paid off. And then the biggest thing, the biggest risk and the biggest milestone in my life, I think that made me probably the retoucher that I am today is in 2005, I got pregnant and we didn't have any family out here. And we were like, I was not making that much money, even though I was a retoucher. It was, an hourly situation. They were kind of giving me as low as they possibly could because the lab business was struggling.
Yep.
And then my husband wasn't really making much. And so, here I am pregnant, 6 months. I'm like, I need to make more money. I need to, go up another rung on the success ladder. I got to make this happen. There's no one else who's going to make this happen for me. We didn't have anyone out here to help us. And, shout out all to the mama bears, to the ladies, because if you have a person that you want to take care of, a child, you can do anything, I mean, you can, it's a powerful feeling. So I was going on interviews with my giant belly, I was going to all the places that offered retouching, the biggest places that paid the most. Mm-hmm. And people would ask me if I was having twins all the time. I was huge. So here I am, doing these retouching tests, and I was so confident and I was so like, this is happening. This is going to happen. I actually moved to Culver City, just assuming I was going to get the job that I want, even though I was pregnant, and that'd be kind of odd for them to hire me at that point. Yeah. So fast forward to 2 weeks after I had my son in 2006, I just kept getting phone calls and all the places that I had, and it's like they calculated it, right? The timing was interesting. Timing was very interesting. They're like, okay, she's probably not pregnant anymore. Let's give her a call. So, and then just an amazing thing happened. I had this bidding war for all these different companies offering me different things. And then they find out that company's offering me. And I'm like, well, I got this offer here. And so then I ended up getting, doubling my income and becoming a full-time retoucher at, a really amazing place. And so that I think was 2006. And so that was really a huge step in the right direction.
So that was like for like an independent retouching house, or was that for like a company?
No, it was a big company. It was Digital Fusion.
Oh, Digital Fusion. Okay. Yeah.
Back in 2006. And that's when, I was able to meet Art and like get more immersed in in which at Pro One, I met a lot of amazing photographers too. But I feel like, once I was at Digital Fusion, then it was more of like, just, the employees too there were just amazing, and just the community and just all the people that, came in there, and I was just working so much, we're doing a lot of great work.
And when did you kind of decide you wanted to start your own company, which you have now, the Happy Pixel Project? Really positive name. I like it.
Oh, you like it? Thanks. Like, that was so hard. I had like a giant notebook full of names. And then I think I was doing crunches in my bedroom, and that name popped in my head. And I was like, yes, like that. It just felt right. But yeah. Although afterwards, I'm like, when you're writing emails and you got to put your address, I'm like, why did I pick the longest name in the world? But, so yeah, I never wanted to work for myself. To be honest, I never thought I would have my own company. That wasn't something I thought about. I was very into the work and very into the relationships and doing a good job. I would have worked for them for the rest of my life. It was just more, again, life kind of pushing you in a different direction. And that place that, things got very unhealthy in the environment, and there was a recession, going on, and they started to lose work, and people were getting laid off, and it was just a very hard place to be. I'm a very empathetic person, and I was super busy, but at the same time, I had this big couch behind me in my office there, and employees would just cycle in throughout the day, and just all day long, it was just how upset everybody was, how nobody was being heard, and it was just really kind of sunk in, and it was just a really unhealthy place to be. I ended up 2009, the catalyst was I ended up in the hospital with pericarditis, and that's fluid around your heart. I had 2.5 inches of fluid around my heart, and here I'm like a young person, like, what the hell? Healthy, and so I ended up finding out it was the only thing that they could say that had caused it was all the stress. So,
damn.
Yeah. So what do I do in the middle of a recession? I decided to start my own company and go into debt. So let's add some more stuff. So anyway,
I'm starting. You're a risk taker. You're a risk taker, Angie.
I don't know how it happened. How am I a risk taker? How did this happen? But so yeah. So again, I didn't want to start my own business. I was a very good worker bee. I feel like I'm a very good worker. I've never been a person to be at a job and like be on Facebook or do something. Like, I work my butt off, and so. Yeah. I was more forced to kind of want to do my own thing just because the environment was so unhealthy. And I'm like, I need to get out of here. I need to figure things out. And they weren't really listening to the employees, no judgment, but they weren't doing the things they needed to do to be successful in their own way. So I'm like, well, I just need to go and yeah, again, risk big. And so it was a crazy time because, again, the recession, nobody would give you money if you wanted to start a business. There was no one handing you money. So so what we did was we just got a bunch of credit cards and we maxed them out. So we already had the debt from our student loans and things like that, my husband and I. And then we added 40 grand on that. So basically 70 grand in debt. I decided to just.
What is that? Just kind of buying like all the computers and all the stuff you need to kind of start your retouching?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and also even more so than that maybe people wouldn't think about is when you're going to start your own business, you need a place for people to go. You can't be in a 700 square foot apartment. Yep. So we had to figure out, okay, we have to change our living space and we can't really afford to, but we have to. If we're going to make this work, people have to be able to come by and drop prints off or come, check out things or, just be able to come over and it look professional and it'd be like where you can spread your arms out and not hit each other. You got to have a space.
Yeah, that's what Art told me. He said back in the day, like you used to kind of do appointment projects. Like a photographer would make an appointment, they'd come and kind of work side by side. Which I was interested to hear that because I would think that
used to be really popular way back, especially Pro One. That was really big.
Did you like that though? Because I feel like it's almost like someone over your shoulder, like you almost can't even get anything done. Like was that kind of different?
Well, what's funny too is like the times and how, how photography, the business has evolved and it keeps evolving. Back when it was film, we had a lot more time for turnaround. So that was more feasible. And there was something really great and fun about it.
Can you hold on one second?
Mm-hmm.
Whoops, sorry.
Oh, no problem.
Little noises
no
out there.
Okay.
What were you saying?
So I was saying sit-in appointments. So it was more common back in the days of film and in the beginning where, you would have months sometimes to turn around a project. And it was really great to like sit with someone and kind of, show them what I did and like kind of really dial in like, oh, let's try this other color treatment. And, there was something really cool about that. But then nowadays it's like there's no time, like the deadlines that are, it's
morning.
Really
they
crazy.
Want next morning.
Yeah, basically you have a few hours as opposed to a few months where and it's of course gotten to that point gradually, but then also too there's another part of the sit-in appointments that it wasn't quite the most efficient way, is that if you were doing something very intricate, having someone over your shoulder, you really wouldn't be as fast because you're like having a conversation. It's more of a social thing.
Yeah.
So there was like really good and really bad because like
because like making selections, like I was doing it last night. Like when you're trying to make like intricate ones, it's like you really got to focus in, and it takes time sometimes.
Oh yeah, it's meditation. I love it. I can do that all day. Yeah. So yeah, there were really good things and then not so good things, but that was a time when that was still more of a common thing. So yeah, I ended up getting renting a house that was really nice. And that way people could come for those appointments. And so that was a big part of the debt of the business was like, you have to get all the equipment, you got to get your, a website, you got to get a CPA, you got to like actually become a business, incorporate. And so it was insane. There was a very scary period where, you had all this debt. And then right off the bat, I was working though, because it happened to be that time where people could find you with the internet. So it's like people were able to find you really quickly and I was working right away. But one of the things I didn't consider, right, is, okay, all this debt and I'm working, right?
Yep.
But the fact that I'd always worked for other people, it didn't occur to me that when you do a job for a magazine and you're done, you send it off, they don't pay you the next day.
No.
They don't pay you the next day. And so when you just went into all that debt, and you're working your butt off, I was barely sleeping the first few months. Oh my gosh, it was crazy. And this was 2010 when I started the Happy Pixel project. So I was working like crazy, but then to have that moment where you're like, you just feel ridiculous because you're so focused on the work and starting to work, but you don't realize, well, it could be 30 days. It could be 60 days. Some places don't
Sometimes
pay 90
90
days.
And then you got those clients you got to chase down. It's like, That's like a lot of, it's like a whole job in itself, just like the accounting and like,
and don't even talk about tech support. That's the other thing. Everyone out there, if you're going to start your own business, it's so funny going from working at places and then you go to your, and you start your own thing. It's like, if computer, hard drive fries, something happens, like printer's not working, the internet is acting, it's like, you got to figure that out. That's on you. You have a job due in 2 hours. You got to make it happen. Like there's no one running in like, I got you.
It just happened to me the other day. Like I needed to send this contract for this shoot next week and my scanner broke. So they needed it that day and I had to like figure something out. So it's just like they putting out fires on a day-to-day basis. And then obviously another big part is you got to find customers. So once you started your own business, like who were kind of some of the first photographers you were working with, and how do you kind of start building, getting your name out there, I guess?
Well, I'm very blessed. I'm very fortunate. I've never advertised and I've never done anything like that. Just because, again, I feel so grateful and so lucky. I just had relationships where they found me or it was all word of mouth. So people started to learn, and what's crazy too is I would have people find me years after I started and they would be like, oh yeah, that company, they told me you moved to a different state and that you didn't do retouching anymore.
Oh, wow.
So I also had that working against me. They were telling people to kind of keep their business,
Damn, that's rough.
They were making things up. So I can't complain. I'm very, very lucky that I have really good relationships with people and I feel like I love what I do. And then I meet someone who loves what they do and it's a beautiful thing and they tell their friends and so I've never had to put the word out.
It's just your work and reputation. And the longer you do it, it just keeps on building. And looking at your work, I know it seems for years you've been working with Art Streiber. How did you kind of first meet him and start working with him? And how's that kind of relationship been over the years working together?
Yeah, he is awesome. He has such an amazing energy and he really loves what he does. And he's the best. And we started working together at Digital Fusion and he was working with a different retoucher, but then more and more he would work with me and we kind of formed a relationship and started to work really well together and communicate really well and collaborate. And so that was, back in 2007-ish.
So for a while.
So working with him is awesome. I mean, he's just, you can look at his Instagram and see, it's just, the man knows his craft. So it makes working on things like composite builds and difficult comps, that he did the work, in the beginning. And so it's going to make my job easier. And so I've been very lucky. We've done some crazy stuff over the years.
Yeah, for sure. And like, is kind of when you first start working with someone like the first time, do you feel like it kind of takes a while to kind of build that relationship and kind of, because like every artist has their own vision, each photographer, you're an artist yourself, so you have your vision how you want it to look. Does it kind of take a while to kind of build that relationship and kind of figure out what people want to accomplish, I guess?
I think it does. I think there's two different ways too. There's, the people who, like I was saying earlier, where they just want you to do your thing. And then there's the people who have, very clear vision of what they want. And so really it's all about communication. And so if it is a new client, sometimes it takes a little bit, but if you have good communication and you can really discuss like, okay, how do you see this looking? Like, what references do you have? Like, what were you thinking when you started out? Like what kind of color are you thinking? What sort of mood? And like the more communication that you have as far as what they see and what you can do, to make that happen, then it kind of works a lot quicker. That sort of like trust happens more when you understand like where you're going, like with the images. And so, there's so many people I've worked with forever where, we're so comfortable and I completely understand what they like. But then a new person, it can happen really quick too, based on sort of just, kind of our, like how that dynamic forms and kind of, that just a mutual, I guess, love for like making good work. And so it can happen pretty quickly, but it's really about communication. I've definitely had negative things where it's like, or the only negative things I can think of is when people can't use their words properly or they can't quite communicate what they want. And they'll be like, we want a very high contrast treatment. And then they'll send me something they're like this, where there's no white point and there's no black. And it's the opposite of contrast. That's the only time you ever have a problem is when people are asking for the opposite of what they're telling you they want. So that's it. Really, communication is the only
because
real issue.
for sure, because like a lot of the stuff you're doing, like you're doing these like really intricate composites. I know like Art sent me a bunch of the stuff you guys have worked on. Like when you're working on these like intricate composites, are a lot of the times are you having conversations with the photographers before the shoot even happens, and like what are you kind of looking to know from them on their end so that the finished product is like what it needs to be, I guess.
Yeah, sometimes we do talk ahead of the shoot. Especially if it's something where it's a scenario where things are going to be cut out a lot or moved into a different environment. It's really good to talk about that, because if you're shooting something that's going to go into a darker background or a light background, there are certain things that you would want to do. And a lot of times people have hair light, like a great edge light. And so if you shoot a person on white, you're not going to be able to separate that to put them into that other environment. So I always tell people, shoot on gray.
Okay.
If you're going to have a hair light or have an edge light, something that separates them from the background, because then when you cut out the hair and you move them into that new environment, you have that perfect edge, and that's going to be a lot more realistic. You're not losing that edge of your lighting. That hair light against white.
Because they shot on white, it just kind of all blends together.
Yeah, exactly. And shooting on white, people think that that's easy to cut out, and so that's a good way to composite. But I always tell people no, because you also have the bounce of the white. So if you have a shoulder, you have a light colored shirt, and you have that blast of light, and you put them on a dark background, it's going to look bad. You have to build a new edge, basically, that's not blown out from that hot edge. So talking about things like that, or especially if it's a certain type of effect, like there's times where people, I'm sure you've seen a lot of shoots where like people will be floating, like they'll be hanging on something, but they weren't really floating. They were sitting on a chair. So it's like, we'll talk about how can we get this person's butt so that it's their butt and they're not like flat on a chair, because you need the butt, right? So those things, you really got to talk that out. And there's always a way to do it, or for the most part, unless something is crazy, but usually there's a way to do it, and talking about it ahead of time is great, but sometimes there isn't time for that. And then, or if it's a client I haven't worked with before, they just give you what they have. They're like,
and that's when you pull up your library of images and assets and like
shoot my own butt and like
do whatever you got to do.
You gotta make it happen. That's the fun part. Just like a photographer, like when you're going in and you're shooting a certain thing, there's so much problem solving. But with photography, you have the main difference that I see where I've done both is photography. You're going to a location. Let's say you're shooting a person in a space. You have this finite amount of time where you're going to have to leave. They're going to have to leave, right? So it ends. With retouching, there is not that end. It's like people will ask you, push more, do this, try this. So it's very different. I feel like as a retoucher, our main job is basically to give our photographers time. We're giving you the time you didn't have to make that wall red. We're giving you the extra time you didn't have to like put this person in here, like to, they had an issue with their wardrobe. So you're like fixing it later because they couldn't fix it at that moment. Like we're creating time. Basically.
Yeah, especially with like editorial, like a lot of times like you can plan what the shoot's going to be all you want. And then some days you show up to the shoot and they're like, oh, actually, we're going to shoot in a different location because something's going on in that room, or this guy doesn't like that. And then you're just kind of like picking up pieces and trying to make it work at the end of the day.
Or they don't want to wear the wardrobe. They refuse to wear it, or like, well, what I always find amazing with photographers, I give you guys so much respect, because what is so crazy to me, and it keeps getting worse and worse and worse, is the time that you have with these subjects. It's so minimal. It's crazy. You have like a couple minutes to do like 2 setups. That to me is like, So I mean, really as retouchers, we're just trying to give you some time. We're trying to, add to the shoot and put in the things that, couldn't really happen in that actual moment.
Yeah. Here, so I pulled up some images. Art sent me some stuff you guys have worked on over the years. So I thought we pull it up. We could talk about a couple of them. This one was cool because I believe it was a composite. Maybe you could talk a little bit about kind of putting this image together. Maybe were there kind of any challenges to working on this?
Well, we definitely did a lot with the light to make it, because they were shot in a white studio, if I remember correctly. This was a while ago. You tested my memory here.
It's all right. It's like, okay, I can bring up a reason.
No. I remember. I don't remember much of my childhood, but I remember all the photos I work on. That's just, I lose all of my personal stuff, but I do remember this. So yeah, it was shot on white in the studio. And so the main challenge here was light and shadow, and, having this very bright sunlight feel. Like we had to get the cast shadows correct. And then also the motion. I do remember very distinctly that Miss Piggy's hair, she, they weren't moving in the studio. So
for anybody listening, you can log on to the YouTube and you can watch the video. You can see we're talking about a photo of the Muppets. I believe was for editorial piece. I don't know what magazine, but
yeah, I'm trying to remember because we had a couple different Muppet jobs. But yeah, so Miss Piggy's hair, that is all hand drawn to make it blowing in the wind. Yeah. So
that's pretty amazing. And was some of this, so obviously the golf carts here, this was all in studio. And there's a plate of the background.
Yes.
Yeah. And they get placed in there. That's one question I was going to ask you. Do you have like one way you like to approach like selections, or a favorite tool? Because there's a million ways you can do it. You can do like the lasso, quick selection tool, masking. Like, how do you kind of approach selections, and does it kind of change from project to project?
Yeah, it really changes. So there are so many different ways to do things, but the way that I choose to select stuff is completely based on the properties of the image, because it's all about something next to, like, what's next to what. So like if you had a person that was, on a white background with a beige sweater, and it was practically white, you would cut that out a certain way. If someone's on, wearing black, it's a lot easier to quickly select that, and modify the selection. And so really I use all the tools. It's just a matter of like what's in the image. If it's hair, like very intricate hair, I use channels a lot. I'm very old school. Like I'm completely self-taught. And so a lot of people that do stuff now, they try to do the faster methods. And if this podcast, if anyone takes anything away from me and from this, if they want to learn retouching, I would say the thing that I'd say the most is that if it's fast and easy, you're probably doing it wrong. So, there are ways to do things that take longer that are always the better solution. And so, yeah, I use a lot of channels. But one tip I could give that I think a lot of people don't think about because it's a bit weird is like, if we go back to my example of like the person in the beige sweater against, or let's say a white sweater against a beige background.
Yep.
What you can do is modify your image on a separate layer before you make your mask. Okay. So if you go into a hue sat layer and you make the red and yellow channels super dark, you're going to be able to select that white sweater against the gray or the beige so much easier because it's no longer beige. You're darkening it. So you can also modify your image on a separate layer before you make that selection. You make it easier on yourself to separate the elements out depending on what you're trying to cut out. So it's like a little weird tip, but it's weird. Great. People don't think about it, but I mean, hey, you got to use all the tools you have, baby. You got to get in there.
I've never been like good at Photoshop because I got my methods, whatever I do. It's pretty light retouching for my stuff, but I always just retouching for me. I remember being in school and taking the classes, and I would get so confused because it felt like it felt like putting a puzzle together, because it'd be like, oh, you can't put this layer on top of this layer because then it doesn't work, or it's like destructive. Do you kind of view it almost as like putting a puzzle together when you're working on these projects, kind of?
Yeah, I do. I have tested hundreds of people. I've worked with so many retouchers, and I've tested so many retouchers, and I had the opportunity to see people's layers and how everybody works so differently. And I work completely non-destructively. Like there is definitely a way that you can work where you can always go back. And where I work for clients, it's all about them. It's all about what they need. So I have to make sure that I can always go back to the beginning. So I have to work a very specific way, but, and so that's just experience and time, like learning how to do things a certain way where you can go back and where, you're doing the best possible methods for what you're trying to, for your end result.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And this photo we're looking at here, it's a Star Wars Stormship Troopers photo where it's like, there must be like 100 of them there. What was kind of your approach to working on this? Because I believe there was only, I think they photographed like 12 or 17.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as many as they're in this picture. What was kind of your method kind of putting this together?
Oh yeah, this is really something. Well, yeah, the challenge here was because they were the same, you know, group, that when you put them in a different location and you adjust their size, you also, to the shadows have to be changed. So a lot of these shadows were recreated to make sense.
Like these shadows where it's like a guy standing from them, you had to like create these.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
So not very many of those are real. But some of them are, and the real ones influenced how to create the other ones.
Wow. Yeah, this seemed like a pretty intricate one. Just because it's the same thing, but yet, like you said, it's like you got to make it all look like kind of uniform, I guess.
Yeah. It's so fun though. It's the problem solving part of it. That to me, it's like that's what I get excited about. Is like, how can we do this?
Yeah. Oh, and I put out a couple questions to my fellow photographers. So it was like I'm interviewing a really talented photographer. And my one friend, he told me, I didn't even know what this was. He's like, ask her, what the heck is frequency separation? And do you even utilize it?
No, I will not talk about it. I see, again, like as I was saying, about methods, and, you know, again, I started in the 90s. So I'm all about keeping texture and doing things a very specific way with cloning. And a lot of it is with light and frequency separation. You know, that's where you're separating kind of the texture and you're doing stuff underneath it. And like, I've had so many people that I've tested who want to work for me, and they send me that garbage. And I'm like, no, you know,
it's just, I
won't do it. Like,
it just seemed like, you say, it's just like a shortcut. It's just kind of like, it's almost
anything that's a shortcut. Yeah. I mean, but it can be useful, I guess. It really, it's about your personal aesthetic too. I mean, we're all, you know, we can't get away from ourselves. We all have our specific eye and what we like and what we are trying to accomplish. And when I see those certain things, you know, and I'll try them out, and like, it's just not, to me, it's not the best method. Like I'm always trying to, a lot of what I do is using light, to manipulate and to keep texture. And it's very much going back to those darkroom days with my tiny weirdo dodge and burn tools. Like that's just you know, I do that, but within Photoshop. And, but yeah, you should see the tests that I get when people want to work for me. And like, it's, you know, just be like a blurry mess, and then they'll sharpen it on top. And it's also, you can't, go back in the same way, you know, you've got all these like pixel based layers. The way I work, I only have pixel based layers, just one, and everything else is adjustment layers and things that I can always go back, or, you know, using smart objects to go back to the original. And so most of the stuff I get, you've got that crazy blur, then resharpen, and then they're cloning on top of that. And then it's
tons of stuff.
I can't, I look at that and it's like, I can't.
Cause like if someone, what advice would you kind of give someone if they wanted to become a retoucher now? Like, what are maybe a couple basic skill sets they should kind of this work on, you think, like if they want to start out, I suppose?
Well, you know, it's a difficult question. I get that question a lot, and it's a difficult one for me to answer because of my 20-year history with Photoshop. I feel like I taught myself, you know, back in the days of film, and I was able to grow with cameras, you know, like where now my methods are a little different because, you know, now you can basically see in people's pores. And so I grew up with that, you know, I had that 20-year experience, and I don't even know what type of tools are out there because when I was learning, I couldn't even afford the internet. So it's like, you know, there was no like learning from videos. But now, so if I was to put myself in their shoes, I would say just look at all the things that you can as far as like the tools and the fundamentals of the program and what you can use. But the most important thing, no matter what you're looking for, like what you're learning, whether it's like from a book or from a tutorial, I think is to do. Just keep doing things, making projects for yourself. Every time you work on an image, you learn something. Every people who've been doing it like me for 20 years, like every time you do something, you're getting better, you're learning, you're always pushing and to also be true to really honest with yourself that whether you love it or not. Because again, I've worked with so many people, and I can say that you can teach people certain skills, and technique, like the technical part of it. But if you don't really enjoy it, like there's a better place to be for you, because you really have to love it in order to get as good as you need to get to like be successful at it, you know, because you really do have to be the kind of person that can sit for a ridiculous amount of hours and because some people can't do that.
No, that's how I am. Like I got mad respect for retouchers. Like my friend Dan, he's like one of my, I went to college with him and I still call him all the time. Like, dude, how do I do this? And like, what do I do wrong? It's like, I don't, this way I'm just like, I can't sit there for like that many hours. And
I've sat with photographers where like, they literally have to get out of the room. They're like, give me a magazine. Like, they're just like, they can't. And it's just been like an hour or two and they can't.
I just get lost with all the tools and like the layering. Like I remember trying to focus in that Photoshop class in college and I really wanted to learn it, but I just felt so lost because it was just like the organizational stuff. So it's just like you said, I think it's just like, you got to love it. And there's a certain like skill set people, maybe it's just how.
Well, and it's great that you're honest with yourself and you see that, because that's, you know what I mean? You need to be, you want to be like in the studio with people connecting, and that's like, you have things that feel right to you. And like, so I think for people who want to, you know, pursue a career in retouching, I think they have to really kind of make sure that that's something that feels like the right fit for them. And then what they would do is, like create projects for yourself. Like once you learn the tools, if you just keep using them, all you can do is get better and you build that experience. And like what I would do, I was actually talking about this recently with someone. What I would do is I would take photos of myself and create these insane retouching projects and try to do it. And what I was talking to them about was showing it, you know, this would be like 2002. Like if I showed you right now, we would laugh for like an hour. It's so bad. So like 2002, I had this idea to like, where I took a photograph of myself and I was holding gumballs and I turned myself into an alien holding planets. And I was thinking, you know, we were talking about that. What if I did that now and then showed the 2003 version and the 2020 version? But oh my gosh, if I have to look at that, it's so bad.
But you were just kind of just doing it.
But you're learning.
Just practice. And because you like
that's exactly how I taught myself, is I would do those things. I would be like, okay, I'm going to see what I can do here. And that was just when I was, you know, I didn't really know that much. Again, I had no instruction. I had no classes. But that's the thing is, like, if you have an idea and you basically use all the tools that you know how to use and you just keep going at it. And that was back then when there were no YouTube videos, you know, and now if you had an idea and you actually watch these YouTube videos and you learn the tools, like you can learn so much just on your own. And well, in today's world in general, you can learn so much on your own with what's out there. And I can't even imagine, like, if I could have my 2003 self now, like, oh my gosh, you probably wouldn't see me for a week. I'd be lost in videos, you know, like
you're stuck on YouTube.
and I don't look at that now, but so once you get the tools down and if you have ideas, the sky's the limit. I mean, you just keep pushing and if you love it and you enjoy it, like you're gonna get better and better. And you know.
That's good advice. And I guess to wrap up, Angie, like you've been doing this for a while, like what kind of keeps you excited and kind of any goals for your work moving forward? Anything you're hoping to work on or anything like that?
I don't have, I guess my goal with the business is I used to work so many hours and I used to stress out so much because it's all deadlines and you know how it is when you're dealing with tons of deadlines. You can like literally lose sight of just being a human being that like gets up and goes to the bathroom and eats every now and again. Like you could just completely lose yourself in work. And so I feel like my only real business goals are to keep doing what I love, but try to have a little bit more of a healthy, which also this pandemic has helped me realize, like, you know, that there is a really beautiful thing about having some free time, but then also being able to throw yourself into work. And so the goal with the business is just to keep doing, you know, great work and keep pushing myself, keep growing as an artist, but then try to have a little bit more of that health aspect in there and not push too hard. But I, you know, a lot of the projects I've been doing lately and just, you know, I don't know, again, it's all about just pushing really. Like I always want to get better. I've been doing a lot of my own shooting and photography. So I'm kind of wanting to do that as a personal artistic goal, as I have a series where I'm combining a lot of my older fine art stuff and shooting. And it's an interesting thing because my job is retouching, but this project is where everything's in camera and no retouching. And it's this funny, like full circle thing where I started out as a fine artist And then I became a photographer, and then I became a full-time retoucher for most of my life. And then now I'm looking into this photography project, and I have one done, but they take so long. But and so it's just funny because now this project is about kind of no retouching and like doing everything, by hand, and creating these little worlds. It's all still life based.
So you're like you're building stuff.
I'm creating stuff. Yeah. I'm making graphic design. I'm doing illustration, photography, painting backgrounds. Like, it is basically everything I love, and this crazy, like, ridiculous little tiny tedious world, but all by my hand. So kind of like what I do in Photoshop, but I'm trying to capture that as an image with no Photoshop. So I'm kind of, that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now. And I'm super excited about it. Like, I don't want to talk too much about it. I didn't finish. They take so long because again, I'm making things like it's all vintage stuff. So I'm like getting a lot of these great props. It's all like 50s stuff. And then I'm like making stuff that goes in with it. And like, it's a lot of creation. It's super fun. I can't think of anything in a simple way. I have books of ideas, but whenever I go to do something where I create it, it's never easy. It's always the most complicated. It's like, can you just like take a picture of something? Like, it's always so, that's just how my brain works. And so I'm super excited about that. And I feel like it influences my work too, like my retouching.
Do you think you'll end up, like, when you finish that, you think you'll post it on your website or anything, or do something with it?
Yeah, I have one that's done, and I feel like it's such a series thing. It's very much, it's combining all my favorite things. It's miniature things, and it's, it's graphics. So it's very, very time consuming. And once I have a couple, I think I'll post them. I think,
all right.
Again, Instagram is so unnatural.
I'm just gonna start commenting all your posts. Keep posting. Keep posting.
Yeah, I know. Well, and like, we were talking about Art's Instagram, and there's so many great Instagram like feeds that I see, and I admire them so much, and they're so amazing. But for me, I don't know if I was born in the wrong century or what, but it feels strange to me. Like, I'm very private, so it feels weird to be like, look at this.
Nah, you're right. It is definitely weird. I mean,
it feels odd to me, but I'm trying to get over it.
I don't put anything personal on my Instagram. It's all just stuff I'm like working on. There's no, I don't know, but everyone does it differently. But I agree, it is weird.
I got to get over it though, because it's a great thing. I mean, I love looking at stuff, so like it's just funny. It's just the posting. I have such weird anxiety about it, but I love it as a medium. I love how sweet everybody is. This community that we're in, it's
the best.
It's just amazing. It really is.
So many people from this and Instagram. Like, one of the photographers I met on Instagram helped me get a job this week. I've never met him in person.
Oh, yes.
And it's just like, so it is. It's good and bad, but it's an interesting tool.
No, I mean, we get to do this for a living. We're here talking about photos. We get to work on photos. I mean, it's amazing. It really is. It absolutely is.
Well, Angie, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. It was a real pleasure talking to you. Big fan of everything you do. For people listening, if they want to check out more of your work, your website, Instagram, where's the best place for them to go?
Well, we talked about Instagram. I'm trying to be better at Instagram. That is Angie Marie Hayes. So you can check that out especially if I continue to be good at it and post things. And then my website, of course, is a little out of date, but that's a good place to go to, especially, if you want to contact me, there's a contact tab, but that's the Happy Pixel Project.
Perfect, Angie. I'll link it and people go check it out. And thanks so much.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Happy Labor Day weekend.
So there you have it. That was the Angie Hayes interview. Just want to thank Angie so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. Have a lot of respect for the work she does, being a photographic retoucher. I've always been terrible at, and I'm not the best retoucher, so it's just like really interesting to hear the mindset of like what someone who does that type of work, how they got into it, and their mindset and how they approach it. So I can't thank her enough. I know I learned a lot. Definitely go check out Angie's website. Her company is called The Happy Pixel Project. Her website is thehappypixelproject.com. She's got lots of her cool work up there and different projects she's worked on over the years with all those amazing photographers I mentioned, like Art Streiber and Peggy Sirota. So definitely go check out her website. And as always, I'll be having weekly podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, as well as our YouTube channel, The Photo Banter. Definitely go check out our YouTube channel and just kind of subscribe, like it, all that stuff. So as always, thanks so much and take care.